We speak now to policing and social conflict specialist Eldred De Klerk, who is a director, senior associate of the African Center for Security and Intelligence Praxis. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Mr. De Klerk. I want to just start with the fact that there are policies in place on police functions and conduct, particularly in areas of public order policing. Now, I believe that there was a spike in injuries and deaths during the period of 2009 to 2014 in terms of injury during a protest. But my question is, before that, was there a meaningful or substantive change from public order policing pre-apartheid into the new democratic era?
Good evening, and thank you for the question. It's a very good one. And on reflection, we can say, yes, we did live through a bit of a honeymoon period. And then I think we probably got a bit lax, like on any other areas of the country, and especially when it comes to public governance. We seem to have abdicated our activism and our holding government and public representatives to account, and especially public service director generals like the National Commissioner, and entrusted the constitutional provisions of the respect for life and dignity to them, thinking that they would uphold these values and they won't betray the public trust. That honeymoon period seems to have been over in the last 10, maybe even 15 years, and it's now time for us to put our foot down as citizens and demand better. The use of rubber bullets and in fact the use of shotguns is actually outlawed when it comes to international conventions for the dispersing of crowds in public order situations. This is something that the minister has pronounced himself on. And when we handed him the report of the panel of experts, on that day, the minister committed himself to drafting a new regulation when it comes to the use of shotguns. Also on that day, the then and now former National Commissioner, General Sithole, actually said that the police will persist in using shotguns when it comes to public order situations. This is against international norms, it's against international conventions, and it's actually frowned upon when it comes to public order policing.
I mean, it's just quite intriguing to see that in one particular year, for instance, there were 830 cases involving the discharge of an official firearm that were registered. And public order policing is about crowd management. So I'd imagine that there are skills, there are expertise which public order policing or police need to undergo. And also the understanding that the discharge of a rubber bullet at close range can be fatal, but I understand that most police don't even think that it can be.
Absolutely. However, the prescript should demand that they shouldn't use it all. There are clear regulations when it comes to the use of force. Any discharge of weapons and rubber bullets or any other buckshot or any other firearm is an escalation of the use of force. Now, what public order police officers are often confronted with is that they believe themselves to be confronting a hostile crowd. They believe that they could be targets of that crowd, whether it's for blunt objects or stones that are thrown at them. And they therefore escalated to what they call stage 3, which justifies a particular level of the use of force. But what we don't have is that we don't have control from command that actually mitigates against the undue use of force. This has actually been spoken about dating back to 1991, when we saw the Goldstone Commission being put in place by the then F.W. De Klerk, no relation to me, I don't know yet. And the Goldstone Commission pronounced itself in the prevention of violence, and it spoke particularly about how polices public order situations. It also said something that I think, if we implemented it then, would have made it easier for us, both in the Marikana situation and in the more recent cases, to identify the officers at any one given scene. because the Goldstone Commission said that every officer should be clearly identified from a distance with a unique number or insignia, and it's often conventionally it's a number. The number would give the officer's designation, his or her rank, their particular number, and some indication of what unit they belong to. So from a distance, I cannot see the little name badge given to public order police, but I can see this unique number, and I know these 3 officers or this particular officer was on site and on scene, and therefore I can look at the register that should be kept about which officers discharged their weapon, how many rubber bullets they actually shot, what other did they shoot, tear gas canisters, did they shoot live ammunition. There should be clear registers of all this so that I can match the officer, the evidence that's given to me, and the register before and after an incident to better understand how that particular scene was managed and controlled. Unfortunately, we've seen in South Africa that we have great intent and really astute and insightful recommendations that unfortunately are not
and that's what I want to get to, Mr. De Klerk. So the panel recommended in on the Marikana inquiry, for instance, that in crowd management operations, there ought to be commanders with recent or relevant training and public order policing experience. But that was in 2012. Fast forward a couple of years on, the critique of public order policing is that there is lack of process and procedure to ensure accountability. I want to point to the deaths of 11-year-old Karabo Khumalo, who died in 2017 after being shot in the head with a rubber bullet in a protest in Bela-Bela. There was a 16-year-old boy who was killed in Standerton as a result of live ammunition in the same year, May 2017. Then there's Jadine Khoza in eThekwini, who died as a result of asphyxiation. This is a 2-year-old, same year, same month, May 2017. So it seems as if, these concerns or outcry is not being heeded.
Absolutely. And the particular concern is that we somehow think that this has got nothing to do with the use of force. Regulations pertaining to the use of force exist. It's very clear that we use force only to thwart an immediate an imminent threat to life. That is when we can escalate the use of force. The police don't have unbridled use of force. They're governed by the very same prescripts for self-defense as you and I. So they use force on our behalf and with our authority, and that which is given by legislation, which is the purview of Parliament and the Ministry. And therefore, they should be held accountable for that. They don't have an unbridled use of force. So regulation in itself exists because legislation when it comes to the use of force exists.
Oh, thank you.
And you're right to say that part of the problem is command. One of the tasks that the panel of experts, unfortunately, did not complete was to actually put in place a proper structured training for a tiered system of command, where control would be the emphasis, and one of that control pertained to an escalation in the use of force. What we don't see, we see routinely that police, as I said, go out, they try to thwart, contain and control the situation as speedily as possible. The most easiest way to do that is to place distance between themselves and the protesters. And the way to do that is to discharge some rubber bullets, chase people down, which is again against their own prescripts, and dispense tear gas canisters, again against their own prescripts when it comes to the use of force. So we don't see command strength that controls how force is used, and you're definitely right to say we don't see any accountability when it comes to the use of force.
Eldred De Klerk, thank you so much for your time and your insights. Social security and policing expert Eldred De Klerk speaking to us on just coincidentally section 205 of the Constitution does actually give a clear guideline on public order policing, as saying that mainly it is to prevent, combat and investigate crime, to maintain public order, so even protect those who are protesting in the carrying out of the duties of public order policing, the police is incumbent on them to protect those as well, right?